Hi, it's Richard again from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with another in our long-running series about the example projects. Today's example project is called Safety Inspection. And before we go and look at the example project, just a reminder, you can get it from the Project tab, go to Example Projects, scroll down through the list until you reach Safety Inspection, so that you know, for example, that the business context that we're talking about here is, for example, automotive inspection, oil and gas, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, life sciences. There are all sorts of situations where we need to perform some sort of inspection. The exact context of this inspection demonstration is a set of documentation from New South Wales in Australia, and there's a link at the end of the project so you can find out more about that. What does this project give us? Well, it gives us a very nicely formatted, mobile-friendly layout. And you can see that it was originally designed for online or disconnected mobile. In the past, I'm speaking in October 2022, in the past Oracle Intelligent Advisor was offered with an offline mobile app and a mobile SDK. That is not currently the case. I am given to understand that they're changing architecture, so there will be one in the future, no doubt, but it was designed to showcase these. And it also includes a form which you can print out at the end of the inspection. As you can see, the key features are mostly interview related, signature collect, forms, and the form includes the signature, and a variety of layout options. So let's go and take a look at the project itself. In terms of the data model, you'll see that it's all very straightforward. We have a large number of inputs and they're all Booleans. You know, basically, did you do this? Did you do that? Have you checked this? Have you checked that? And then we have some intermediate attributes. If I extend this, yeah. So basically understanding whether there will be additional comments or not, and you can enter those comments. And finally, if we scroll down, there we are, we have a variety of goals to identify whether certain things have been checked or whether the inspection report can be generated because you've managed to check everything, that sort of thing. So it's a very straightforward model. In the interview itself, as you can see, very nicely formatted, so they've used the styles dialog to create a very customized layout. I guess the most important thing is that they have done all of this without doing any customization over and above in here. There's no custom extensions required to get this look and feel. So let's go ahead and run the interview and see what we get. So you put in your name as the inspector name. The site is going to be, and click next. So here's a checklist of things we need to check in respect of buildings and floors. So I'll say that they were checked and no follow-up is required. I've checked the lighting and follow-up is required. And we'll say there's some missing lights. Okay. And next, and you can probably guess where this is going. We're going to go through each of these steps and have a checklist presented to us, and then we will say whether we've checked it and whether a follow-up is required. I'm going to go ahead and check all of these. As you can see, it's very well adapted to a mobile scenario because it's very easy to imagine that on a mobile device this will easily all fit into one page. There wouldn't be any scrolling. I'm scrolling mostly because I'm in the debugger. And we'll go through here, and we'll go through here, and we'll say that, yeah, there were some possible fireworks. That's not a firework, that's a firework. Stored in fridge. That's a good enough place. And I'll carry on through them. Waste disposal, pollution, scrap metal, protective gear. So you can imagine that I've been called in to inspect a property or inspect a team working on something. I'll make some notes. I consider that this is a pass with generally high standards. And I'll go ahead and sign my signature. Click next. And we come to the inspection summary, and you can see a variety of check marks and items for follow-up And here you can see the report, as I mentioned, also a link to the third-party checklist. So if I open up the inspection report, we should see a summary of what I just did. There we are. Here's my, so checked, everything's checked, and a couple of things required follow-ups with comments nicely laid out, and my signature as the inspector at the end. So if I go back to one of these and say it wasn't checked, and go forward, come all the way to the end now, we'll see that there's a warning message on the result page to tell me that I haven't completed all checks. So one of the reasons that you'll use this project for learning is to understand that there are a good number of visibility rules applied to these sort of labels. So if all of the safety checks are true, then this is hidden. And you saw that when I said that one of the safety checks hadn't been done, this was displayed. And if there's a safety inspection item that requires a follow-up, then we get this message as well. So I'm going to go back to wherever it was and say I check this now. Back to the summary. So you'll know, back to the inspector result. So you'll notice that the red message has disappeared because the Boolean that was controlling the visibility of the label has made sure that the label is no longer shown. If I go to my go to my data tab, into my inferred attributes, you'll see that, and this might surprise you, is that the comments are actually inferred attributes. That's because we start off with the additional comments for hazardous substances brackets explosives equals, and you can think of this as the default value, and that's why it's in a file called default values. The default value is blank, and then we state that the hazardous substance explosive checks are complete if the explosives has been checked and it's known whether or not the requires a follow-up, and additional comments is known. So it's using the known function to identify whether things have been completed or not, and then it has a couple of it has a Boolean at the top. And essentially, even though you enter a manual value to the comment, it is considered to be inferred because the original inferred value was blank. So you need to remember that if you add a default value in this way, and then you need to display it so that users can change it, it will show up not in the input attributes, it'll show up in the inferred attributes, because technically speaking it was inferred. You then overwrote it, but it was inferred. Same for the missing lights, and same for my comments, which had a default value of nothing, but then I overwrote the default value with generally high standards. Let's go and have a look at the other rules in place. We have some default values, which, as I mentioned earlier, will be a succession of rules simply to infer a blank. And this is used for the comments and the other. So there were comments for each type of inspection, plus the comments for the overall. These rules default the comments field to blank, so if the screens are not visited, they do not appear as unknown on the generated form. This is a fairly typical workaround to make sure that when you generate a PDF, you don't get a bunch of unknowns if you didn't go to a particular screen. You just get a blank. And let's take a look at the safety inspection follow-up rules. And as you can see, it's basically telling us that there is an inspection that requires follow-up if any of these required a follow-up. So these are a Boolean. Each of these is a Boolean referring to one area where I would have checked or unchecked the follow-up button, follow-up checkbox, I beg your pardon. So all in all, a very simple layout, a very simple set of rules, a very simple data model, a nicely fine-tuned interview, and a quite well-designed Safety Inspection Report RTF template. So what can we learn from it? Well, clearly, with a simple project like this, it encourages you to dig a little deeper. For example, to add more inspection, more checks. You could, for example, add yourself a new screen and then add some new booleans to check for a new scenario, and then add them into the building and structures checks are complete. For example, if you wanted to add a new section to buildings and structures, you would need to add your new screens and your new logic check into this. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the original source document, and it does mention that this is an abbreviated version. So one thing you could do perhaps is to go there and go and grab an updated version and perhaps extend it. So yeah, it's fairly straightforward to be able to add a new layer of checks to one of these areas. And finally, I think it's a great example of how to customize the layout of a interview using only the standard styles. So you could experiment with what does it look like if I use the train track, or what I use the thermometer. Yeah, I think they did a pretty good job using the left menu. And I'm going to leave it at that. And then, of course, they changed all the color schemes for the different kinds of active screen, complete screen, and incomplete screen, which produces a really easy to follow thing. You can imagine if you're in the field and you're doing something and you're busy, you will quite often use visual cues such as colors to tell you what it is you're doing and what it is you haven't done yet and that you need to do and stuff like that. And in the same way here, things that you've already completed. So that about wraps it up for the safety inspection. See you next time. prior to that order date.